Much you turn the TV on, you go, oh my gosh, I don't want to watch this. I need something, fulfilling.
When you see those glossy magazine spreads about Priscilla Presley's homes, the elegant Beverly Hills estate, the sophisticated California properties, the carefully curated spaces that scream wealth and taste, you're supposed to think. Look at her, thriving after Elvis, building her own empire, living her best life beyond Graceland. But here's what those magazines never tell you. Every single one of those homes was built with Elvis's money, not metaphorically, not in the sense that her connection to him opened doors. Literally. The foundation, the mortgage, the lifestyle that allowed her to acquire property after property, all of it traces back to a man she divorced 50 years ago. And that would be one thing if she'd just moved on, lived her life, enjoyed the financial security that came from 6 years of marriage. People can debate the fairness of that, but it's legal, it's done, it's history. But Priscilla didn't just move on. She built a fortress. Multiple fortresses, actually. And every single one of them served the same purpose: control. Not control over property, control over Elvis's story, Elvis's legacy, Elvis's family. Because while Priscilla was establishing herself in luxury homes across California, decorating them with the kind of sophisticated taste Elvis himself never had, filling them with art and furniture that screamed, "I've moved beyond Memphis." The actual Presley family was being systematically locked out of the one place that should have been theirs forever. Graceland. Elvis bought Graceland for his family, not for himself alone, not as an investment property, not as a status symbol. He bought it so his mother would finally have the home she deserved, so his father wouldn't have to worry about rent. So his extended family, the cousins and aunts and uncles who'd supported him since Tupelo, would always have a place to gather. That was the whole point. Graceland was supposed to be the Presley family home, forever. But the moment Elvis died, Priscilla started transforming it into something else. Something that looked like a memorial but functioned like a business. Something that appeared to honor Elvis but actually served one person's interests, hers. And here's where her life beyond Graceland becomes so calculated it's almost impressive. She didn't just move away and hand over the keys. She moved away and kept control. She established herself in homes that gave her geographical distance from Memphis, physical separation from Elvis's family and their expectations. But she never relinquished power over the place that mattered most. So you have this bizarre situation where Priscilla is living in Beverly Hills, hosting parties, doing her thing, building what looks like an independent life, while simultaneously micromanaging every single decision about Graceland. Who gets access? What stories get told? Which family members are welcome? How Elvis gets presented to the public. She created physical distance so she could claim she'd moved on, while maintaining iron grip control so nobody else could move in. Think about what that meant for Elvis's actual family. The people who'd lived at Graceland with him. The cousins who'd stayed up all night with him, eaten breakfast with him, watched him grow from broke kid to global superstar. The relatives who'd supported him before Priscilla even knew his name. They couldn't just drop by anymore. They couldn't gather there for holidays. They couldn't bring their kids to show them Grandpa Elvis's home. They couldn't sit in the places they'd sat with him, remember him in the spaces where actual memories happened. Because Priscilla had turned Graceland into a museum. And museums don't have family reunions. Museums have operating hours and ticket prices and approved narratives. Meanwhile, Priscilla's homes, the ones she was building and buying and inhabiting, those became the real centers of power. Those became the places where decisions about Elvis's estate got made, where business deals got negotiated, where Priscilla held court as Elvis's eternal representative, even though she divorced him before he died. Her houses weren't just real estate. They were command centers, political headquarters for a 50-year campaign to control how the world understood Elvis Presley. And the family, they got Graceland tour days. They got to visit the home Elvis built for them like they were tourists, like they were strangers, like they hadn't been there when it actually mattered. Every magazine article celebrating Priscilla's beautiful homes, her impeccable taste, her successful life beyond Elvis, it's all propaganda. Not because she doesn't have nice houses, not because she hasn't built wealth, but because the story being told is about independence and moving forward when the reality is about control and holding on. She never moved beyond Graceland, she just moved beyond Memphis. There's a difference. Because moving beyond Graceland would mean relinquishing control. It would mean letting the family back in. It would mean allowing other voices, other perspectives, other memories to shape how Elvis is remembered. But Priscilla couldn't do that, because if the family had access, if they had platform, if they had any real power, her carefully constructed narrative would collapse. People would hear different stories. They'd learn different truths. They'd realize that the woman who spent 50 years positioning herself as Elvis's great love was actually the person who understood him least. So she built her life in California, her elegant homes that said, "I'm my own woman now," while keeping her hands wrapped around Graceland's throat. She created the illusion of distance while maintaining absolute control. And when you understand that, when you see her family journey for what it actually is, those beautiful houses stop looking like symbols of independence. They start looking like what they really are: territories conquered and occupied, funded by a dead man's money, defended against his living family, maintained for the sole purpose of preserving one woman's power. What kind of person does that? What kind of person locks a dead man's family out of his home while building palaces for herself with his money? What kind of person turns a family gathering place into a tourist attraction while creating private sanctuaries where that same family isn't welcome? Someone who understands that real estate isn't just about property. It's about power. And Priscilla's entire life beyond Graceland has been about maintaining the power she seized the moment Elvis couldn't stop her anymore. The house that Elvis built became the empire that Priscilla stole, and every home she's lived in since has been built on that theft. Elvis Presley had a philosophy about family that everybody who actually knew him can confirm. There was always room for one more person at the dinner table, one more cousin crashing in a guest room, one more relative who needed help, needed work, needed a place to belong. That wasn't just generosity, that was who Elvis was at his core. He remembered what it felt like to be poor, to be on the outside, to need help and have nobody offer it. So when he finally had money, had space, had power, he shared it. Obsessively, compulsively, sometimes to his own detriment. But that was the deal. You were family, you had access, you had a place, you mattered. Priscilla had a different philosophy. Exclusive access, invitation only, and the guest list was entirely up to her. The contrast wasn't subtle. Elvis's approach to family was expansive, chaotic, open door. Priscilla's approach was curated, controlled, corporate. And the moment she had power, real power, the kind that comes with being the executor of an estate, she rebuilt Elvis's world in her image. Which meant the family had to go. Not dramatically, not in some explosive confrontation where she threw people out and changed the locks. That's not how this kind of erasure works. It works quietly, bureaucratically, with policies and procedures and official reasons that sound reasonable until you realize what's actually happening. Family members who'd been part of Elvis's daily life for decades suddenly needed appointments to visit Graceland. They needed approval. They needed to go through proper channels. They needed permission from people who didn't know Elvis, had never met Elvis, worked for Priscilla. And if you're thinking that sounds cold but maybe necessary for running a business, remember who these people were. These weren't distant relatives trying to profit off a famous name. These were the people who raised Elvis, the cousins who shared rooms with him when the family was too poor to afford separate beds, the aunts who fed him when his own mother was struggling, the friends who knew him before he could afford a decent guitar, let alone Graceland. These people changed his diapers. They taught him his first chords. They sat with him during his mother's funeral when he was so devastated he couldn't function. They were there for every version of Elvis that existed before he became Elvis Presley, the brand. And Priscilla systematically erased them. She erased them from Graceland events, from official estate functions, from the narrative about who mattered in Elvis's life. She replaced them with business associates, entertainment industry connections, people who enhanced her image and her network but had zero connection to Elvis's actual story. Family members describe showing up for Graceland events, official celebrations of Elvis's life and legacy, and being turned away at the gates. Not because they weren't invited, because they weren't on the list, because somebody working for Priscilla decided they didn't need to be there. Imagine that. You grew up with someone, you loved them before the world knew their name, you supported them through everything. And then they die and suddenly you need security clearance to attend events celebrating their memory. But Priscilla's erasure went deeper than just physical access. She rewrote the family tree. Not legally, she couldn't do that, but culturally. In every interview, every documentary, every official account of Elvis's life, the family that actually formed him started disappearing from the story. Priscilla positioned herself as Elvis's primary relationship, his most important connection, the person who understood him best. And in doing that, she made everyone else peripheral, background noise, supporting characters in a story that was really about her and Elvis. The cousins who were his first friends, gone. The extended family who made Graceland feel like home, irrelevant. The Memphis community that supported him from the beginning, erased. Instead, you get Priscilla's version, where Elvis's real life started when she entered it, where everything before her was just prologue, where the people who actually knew him longest didn't matter because they weren't part of the romantic narrative she was selling. And here's what makes this erasure so insidious. Priscilla's personal spaces, her homes, her world, became Presley-free zones where Elvis's actual relatives weren't welcome. She could have used her position to bring the family together. She could have hosted gatherings, created opportunities for Elvis's relatives to stay connected, built bridges instead of walls. She had the money. She had the space. She had the power to make it happen. But she didn't, because having the family around meant sharing the narrative. It meant other voices, other memories, other versions of Elvis that might contradict hers. It meant giving up control. So her homes became exclusive territories where Elvis was remembered her way, discussed her way, understood her way. And if the family wanted to participate in that, they had to accept her version of events. They had to stay quiet about what they knew. They had to become supporting actors in her production. Most of them couldn't do it. Most of them chose dignity over access. They chose truth over invitation. They stayed away rather than pretend Priscilla's version of Elvis was accurate. And Priscilla used that distance as proof that they didn't care. See, they're not here, they're not involved, they don't matter. It's the perfect trap. Exclude people, then use their absence as justification for their exclusion. But the real psychological warfare happened to the one person who couldn't escape, Lisa Marie. Elvis's daughter grew up watching her mother erase her father's family. She watched Graceland transform from family home to corporate asset. She watched relatives who loved her father get pushed to the margins. She watched her mother build an empire on her father's name while systematically removing everyone who actually knew him. And Lisa Marie was stuck in the middle, too young to fight it, too connected to both sides to choose, too aware of the truth to accept her mother's version, but too financially dependent to challenge it. She grew up feeling like a visitor in her own father's legacy, like she needed permission to have her own memories, her own relationship with his story, her own understanding of who he was, because her mother controlled all of it. That's what Priscilla's family journey actually created. Not connection, not healing, not preservation of Elvis's values. Isolation, erasure, control. The family Elvis loved most, the people he would have wanted at every table in every room, part of every decision, they got locked out. Systematically, deliberately, permanently. And the woman who locked them out built her brand on being the keeper of his legacy. That's not a family journey, that's a hostile takeover, and every person Elvis actually loved paid the price. Lisa Marie Presley spent her entire life trapped between two realities. The reality her mother was selling to the world, the devoted widow, the protective parent, the woman preserving Elvis's legacy with grace and dignity. And the reality Lisa Marie was actually living, watching that same mother systematically erase, manipulate, and monetize everything her father actually cared about. For decades, Lisa Marie stayed quiet. She played along. She supported her mother publicly even when privately she was watching something that looked less like legacy preservation and more like identity theft. But at some point, something shifted. At some point, Lisa Marie stopped being the child caught in the middle and became the woman who'd seen enough. And when she finally made her move, she didn't do it with drama or public accusations or media warfare. She did it the only way that would actually matter, legally, permanently, with a trust amendment that said everything she couldn't say out loud. Cut Priscilla out, give control to Riley, protect the next generation from what this generation endured. That wasn't anger, that was love. The kind of love that looks past your own complicated feelings to protect your children from the same pain. The kind of love that says, I know who you are now and I won't let you do to them what you did to me. Think about what it takes for a daughter to formally, legally remove her own mother from any position of authority over the family legacy. That's not normal family tension. That's not a fight over money or control. That's a declaration born from decades of observation, decades of experience, decades of watching your mother choose power over truth every single time. Lisa Marie grew up in spaces her mother carefully curated to tell specific stories. Priscilla's homes weren't just houses, they were stages. Sets designed to present a particular version of the Presley story, with Priscilla as the central figure and everyone else as supporting cast. And in those spaces, Lisa Marie learned early that her own memories didn't matter if they contradicted her mother's narrative. Her own experiences with her father didn't count if they complicated the story Priscilla was selling. Her own understanding of who Elvis was had to be filtered through her mother's approved version, or it wasn't welcome. That's a special kind of psychological torture for a kid. Having your own father's story taken from you by the person who's supposed to protect it for you. Having your memories questioned. Having your grief managed. Having your relationship with your dead father mediated by someone who's using that relationship to build an empire. Lisa Marie tried to fix it, multiple times, in ways the public never saw. She tried to restore family access. She'd invite her father's relatives to events, try to create opportunities for connection, try to rebuild what her mother had dismantled. And every time she'd run into her mother's systems, the gatekeepers, the policies, the bureaucratic barriers that Priscilla had built specifically to keep the family out. Lisa Marie would push for changes to how Graceland operated, how the estate was managed, how profits were distributed. And she'd watch her mother block every attempt, redirect every effort, maintain the status quo that served Priscilla's interests above everyone else's. She tried to tell different stories about her father, to share memories that didn't fit her mother's romantic narrative, to honor the parts of Elvis that Priscilla had erased, his connection to his family, his roots, his values, the things that actually mattered to him beyond fame and image. And she watched her mother smile politely and then continue telling the same stories she'd always told, as if Lisa Marie hadn't spoken. As if the daughter's first-hand memories of her own father were less valid than the ex-wife's carefully rehearsed anecdotes. Every failed attempt taught Lisa Marie the same lesson: her mother would never stop. This wasn't something that could be reasoned with or negotiated with or loved into changing. This was fundamental to who Priscilla was: the control, the narrative management, the empire built on one man's name and maintained by erasing everyone who actually knew him. And then came the breaking point, the specific incident that made Lisa Marie realize protection wasn't just necessary, it was urgent. The details don't matter as much as what it revealed. Priscilla would sacrifice family, would sacrifice truth, would sacrifice her own daughter's well-being if it meant maintaining power over Elvis's legacy. That's when Lisa Marie started planning, not reactively, not emotionally, strategically, the way you plan when you've finally seen clearly and you know exactly what needs to happen. She amended the trust, and she didn't do it during a fight or in a moment of anger. She did it thoughtfully, with legal counsel, with absolute clarity about what she was doing and why. The amendment wasn't punishment, it was protection. It was Lisa Marie saying, "I've watched you operate for my entire life. I know what you do with power, I know how you use family for your own purposes, and I will not allow you to do to my children what you did to me." She gave control to Riley, her oldest daughter, the one she trusted to see clearly, to act with integrity, to honor what actually mattered instead of what looked good publicly. And in doing that, Lisa Marie sent a message that couldn't be misunderstood. Mom, you don't get to control this anymore. You don't get to decide how Dad is remembered. You don't get to erase his family. You don't get to build your brand on his name while destroying his values. It's over. The irony is devastating. Priscilla spent 50 years building her family journey, the narrative of the devoted mother, the protective matriarch, the woman keeping the Presley family together. She made that role central to her public identity. She sold that story in every interview, every appearance, every carefully staged moment. And her own daughter's final act was to formally declare, "You're not protecting this family. You're the threat I'm protecting them from." That trust amendment is the single most honest document in the entire Presley story, because it strips away all the performance, all the PR, all the carefully managed image, and says plainly what Lisa Marie learned through decades of painful experience. Priscilla Presley is not the keeper of Elvis's legacy. She's the person the legacy needs to be kept safe from. And Lisa Marie made absolutely certain that after she was gone, her daughters would have the legal power to do what she'd spent her whole life trying to do: take back what was stolen, restore what was erased, tell the truth that Priscilla spent 50 years burying. That wasn't anger, that was clarity. That was a mother's love protecting her children from a grandmother's control. And that's why Priscilla is so desperate right now. Because for the first time in 50 years, she can't manipulate her way out of this. Her own daughter said no, legally, permanently, from beyond the grave. And nothing Priscilla does, no media tour, no sympathetic interview, no carefully crafted image, can change what that trust amendment means. Lisa Marie finally broke free, and she made sure her daughters could too. Riley Keough didn't just inherit Graceland when her mother died. She inherited a war that's been raging for 50 years. A war most people don't even know is happening because one side has been fighting in shadows while the other side owns every spotlight in the building. But here's what makes Riley different from every other person who's tried to challenge Priscilla's empire. Riley has what her mother gave her: legal authority, actual power, the ability to make changes that can't be undone by media manipulation or public sympathy campaigns. And Priscilla knows it. That's why she's everywhere right now. You think it's coincidence that Priscilla launched a full media tour exactly when Riley consolidated control of the estate? You think it's random that she's doing interview after interview, red carpet after red carpet, positioning herself as the devoted grandmother and legacy keeper right when her granddaughter has the power to dismantle everything she built? This is strategy. This is warfare. This is Priscilla doing what she's always done, fighting battles in the court of public opinion, because that's the only court where she still has an advantage. Because legally she lost. Lisa Marie's trust was airtight. The amendment removing Priscilla was valid, properly executed, completely enforceable. Priscilla challenged it immediately, tried to claim it wasn't legitimate, tried to fight Riley for control. And she lost. The courts upheld Riley's authority. So now Priscilla can't win through lawyers. She can't win through legal challenges. She can't use the system to override her own daughter's explicit final wishes. But she can win through perception. She can make Riley look like the villain. She can position herself as the wounded matriarch being pushed aside by an ungrateful younger generation. She can build so much public sympathy that any change Riley makes looks cruel, disrespectful, motivated by greed rather than truth. That's the gambit. That's why every interview Priscilla does right now includes subtle references to family healing, to preserving Elvis's legacy together, to her role as the protective elder trying to keep everyone connected. She's not talking to Riley, she's talking to the public. She's building a firewall of sympathy so that when Riley starts making the changes Lisa Marie wanted, when Riley starts restoring family access, redirecting resources, correcting the narrative, Priscilla can point to all these interviews and say, "See, I tried. I wanted peace. Riley is the problem." It's brilliant manipulation, and it would probably work if Riley were anyone else. But Riley isn't fighting blind. She watched what happened to her mother. She saw how Priscilla used public image as a weapon. She understands exactly what her grandmother is doing because she's watched her do it her entire life. And more importantly, Riley has something her mother never had: distance. Lisa Marie was too close to Priscilla, too tangled in the complicated emotions of being a daughter, too damaged by a lifetime of manipulation to fight effectively. Riley sees her grandmother clearly, not through the filter of mother-daughter obligation, not through the guilt that comes from challenging your own parent, just clearly, as the person who erased her grandfather's family, who controlled her mother's access to her own father's story, who built an empire on one man's name while systematically betraying everything he valued. And Riley has power now, real power, the kind that terrifies Priscilla because it can't be managed with a sympathetic interview or a tearful public appearance. Riley can change how Graceland operates. She can open doors Priscilla locked. She can invite back the family members who were excluded for decades. She can shift how Elvis's story gets told, who gets to tell it, whose voices finally matter. She can redirect estate profits to the relatives who were cut out while Priscilla lived in luxury on Elvis's money. She can restore relationships Priscilla severed. She can make decisions about Elvis's legacy based on what Elvis actually wanted instead of what benefits Priscilla's brand. And according to sources close to the estate, that's exactly what Riley is planning. Not loudly, not with press releases or announcements, quietly, systematically, making changes that undo 50 years of Priscilla's control one decision at a time. Family members are reportedly being contacted. Conversations are happening about restoring access to Graceland, about giving Elvis's actual relatives a voice in how his legacy is managed. Discussions are underway about how to honor Elvis's real values, his generosity, his loyalty to family, his roots, instead of the sanitized, commercialized version Priscilla created. Riley is reportedly reviewing estate finances, looking at how money has been distributed, questioning decisions that benefited Priscilla while excluding blood relatives. She's examining contracts, partnerships, business deals that were made without input from Elvis's actual family. And every single one of these actions threatens the empire Priscilla spent 50 years building. That's why the media tour is happening now. That's why Priscilla is suddenly everywhere, reminding the world that she's Elvis's widow, even though she divorced him half a century ago. That's why she's playing the role of the concerned grandmother who just wants what's best for the family, even though her own daughter explicitly cut her out to protect her grandchildren. Priscilla is creating a narrative cushion. She's building public sympathy now so that when Riley's changes become public, when the family starts speaking out, when the truth about how Priscilla operated for 50 years finally emerges, she can claim she's the victim. It's preemptive damage control. It's strategic manipulation. It's everything Priscilla has always been, just more desperate now because the clock is running out. Because here's what Priscilla understands that nobody else seems to. Riley is young. Riley has decades ahead of her. Riley can outlast every strategy, every media campaign, every attempt at public manipulation. Time was always Priscilla's advantage. She's been controlling this narrative for 50 years. She outlasted everyone who challenged her because she was willing to play the long game. But now time is her enemy, because Riley has more of it. And Riley has something even more powerful, her mother's final wishes, legal authority, and absolutely nothing left to lose. Riley doesn't need Priscilla's approval. She doesn't need her grandmother's blessing. She doesn't need to make peace or find compromise or worry about damaging their relationship. That relationship was damaged decades ago. Lisa Marie made sure Riley understood that, made sure Riley knew exactly who her grandmother was and what she'd done, made sure Riley had both the power and the clarity to finally end this. And that's what Priscilla is really fighting. Not a legal battle, not a family dispute, her own obsolescence, the end of 50 years of unchallenged control, the moment when Elvis's real family finally takes back what was stolen. Riley's inheritance isn't just Graceland. It's the responsibility to tell the truth, to restore what was erased, to honor her grandfather's actual legacy instead of her grandmother's fiction. And if Riley succeeds, when Riley succeeds, everything Priscilla built collapses. The narrative, the authority, the carefully crafted image of the devoted widow preserving her late husband's memory. All of it falls because it was always built on lies. And lies can't survive once the people who know the truth finally have the power to speak it. Priscilla's media tour isn't about preserving Elvis's legacy. It's about preserving her own, and she's running out of time. If this exposed the truth behind Priscilla's carefully managed image, share it before her PR machine buries it. Subscribe and hit notifications, because what Riley does next will either restore Elvis's real legacy or let Priscilla's 50-year fiction become permanent history. The battle for truth is happening right now. The family's silence is over. Don't miss what comes next.